would you
being
agree
a
it's a human?
conscious...
Would you agree with me that it's a human?
No, I wouldn't, because being a conscious being is what makes you a human.
Being a conscious being does not make you a human. Do you think that it's justified to off the kid at a day old?
Yes.
Wow. So you support infanticide. That's crazy. So, Harley, how are you?
Hi, I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. What do you have to say?
I just don't see how it's any of your business what I, for example, do with my body. Like, you might think that me getting an abortion would be wrong, but I know my situation better than you do. And if in my situation, me getting an abortion would be the best choice for me and the future child, then why is it any of your business whether I do that or not?
So the reason why I can say something on this issue and not first go to you to let you dictate what the issue is because the issue itself has a nature. There is objective realities about what is happening here. And so, yes, let's hear your opinion. I'm curious, and if you're a woman struggling with this, let's hear what you have to say on the matter. Sure. However, let's not be mistaken, right? There are truths about what we're looking at here. And when you break down those truths and you try to understand what is good and bad about the certain decisions that are put forth, when you try to understand what we should be protecting, what we really shouldn't care about, I think it's so clear that no woman should ever electively choose to off her own kid.
But that's not what it is. At the end of the day, a fetus is not a conscious being. And
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It does matter because
would you agree it's
a
human? Would you agree with me that it's a human?
No, I wouldn't, because being a conscious being is what makes you a human. That's what makes you an actual living person.
That is not true. Being a conscious being does not make you a human. That's
yes,
one of your states that you can enter, sure. But that doesn't make you a human. Being a human, first of all, is grounded in your biology. So we know a human by what species said being is a part of. We know the difference between a human and a dog because of the differences in their species. So this isn't some like abstract thing where we have to beat our heads over. We can figure out what a human is.
Yes, it does come down a lot to biology, but at the end of the day, it's not a conscious being, so it is different. Like, would you say, for example, that me picking a flower is me killing something?
I mean, the flower might survive if you put it in water or soil again. I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to say that you're killing the flower, if it withers and dies, eventually when things are far from the vein, they tend to wither and pass away. So.
Yeah, but it's not a conscious being, so you wouldn't have a problem with it if I went to go pick a flower right now. But you have a problem with it if I get rid of a conscious being.
Understand something about the flower. The flower has some sort of vegetative type of soul that animates it. So the flowers and plants, they really can't do much. They're beautiful. I'm glad God has given them to us. I love looking at the trees and just being in awe at what our Lord has created here. But flowers aren't humans, and neither are the lower creatures. The lower creatures are great as well. I recently had a dog pass away about a month ago that I missed dearly. I know that she wasn't a human, but I cared about her, and she had a different type of soul as well. I would say something like a sensitive soul that animated her, but she lacked in ways that humans, in certain ways that puts her below humans, that being, in her intellect and her will, her ability to rationalize things. She just didn't have that. Now, when it gets to the human being, well, we're the best.
I'm sorry,
right? We're the leaders of this planet. We have the animating spirit that allows us to rationalize things, and we can have these conversations, and we can put our foolish desires away and do what is right in certain situations.
At the end of the day, my entire point is that it's a personal decision with...
Okay, so the flower and the human are vastly different. When you off that human being in the womb, what you are doing is you're depriving that human being of their future life, their current life and their future life. And their future life is going to be like ours. It's going to be exercising our rational faculties, enjoying life, finding our happiness. These people don't they want to live. They want to keep enjoying their current lives because they actually grew from those sufferings and from those terrible times. And now they live a life that brings them happiness. Some of them have families. They would never say that they wish they were aborted. So simply on this idea that you had a very tough upbringing, which I'm very sorry about, we cannot just say, well, we should just be offing every single kid that we can predict their upbringing is tough.
I agree with what you're saying, but at the end of the day, if my mum, for example, were to have had an abortion 19 years ago, that wouldn't be any of your business. It would have stopped a lot of pain and a
Well,
lot
it
of
would be my
for a lot of
business, Harley,
people.
because we live in a society and we all live together and we make political decisions. And if you're going to off a child only because you believe that at some point the child won't want to live or that this child's going to have a difficult life, I'm going to step in and say, no, we don't just off human beings on some prediction that they're going to want to be offed. Furthermore, I don't believe that people should be offing themselves anyway. That's a wrong thing to do. So it's not that it's just none of my business. It's no, I'm allowed to have views in our political environment that support what is good and encourage people to choose what is good and stop people from choosing what is evil.
But it's not evil. Let's say, as an example, I'm epileptic. So if I were to get pregnant and then go through labor, there is a severely high chance that I would pass away from a seizure during labor. Severely high. So why should I not be allowed to get an abortion, and why would getting an
I give the
abortion
medical
make
exception.
me
So that might
evil?
be a case where it's medically reasonable to get an abortion. If the chance is high enough, that's a reasonable thing to do to save your life. Because at the end of the day, you are innocent as well. You and the child are innocent. So, yeah,
Right, but
that
then
could
you just
potentially be
sat
reasonable.
there. You're making this blanket statement of ban abortion and that it's evil, but then there are
Sure.
different situations that you don't know about and that you
Well, I
won't
give the medical
understand
exception.
unless you're
I don't think
physician.
that. I think that if something is called an abortion at certain in certain situations, I would make it permissible only if you are saving the mother's life. The mother's life needs to be saved in this way of aborting the child. That's the only way that it's acceptable. Otherwise, it's
But you're
not.
saying it as just a blanket
Right,
statement.
because we're statistically speaking, the vast majority of abortions we're looking to ban. Medical exception, that's less than 0.5%. So that doesn't happen
Okay,
that
then
often. Most
let's
pregnancies
talk
are healthy.
about. Okay, but like as an example, let's say they've taken all the precautions, because I've seen people get pregnant after using a condom and birth control. Let's say you might disagree with that too. I know that a lot of pro-lifers and Christians disagree with any form of birth control, because they think it's like God's way and that, and like I respect that
I mean, it's
opinion.
not good, but
But
I wouldn't ban birth control in our society currently.
they've taken all of the precautions because they know that they can't handle having a child, whether it's because they wouldn't be able to handle the stress of the pregnancy, or because they're not financially stable, or they don't want that child to go into a foster home because maybe they were raised in one, or like whatever the reason is, they just know that they can't bring a child into the world at that point. So why would it then be wrong? Because they've taken all the precautions to try and stop it. Why would that then be wrong, or
Because
as you
their
put before,
precautions,
evil?
whatever they tried to do, didn't happen. Something else happened. A child was created, and now there's shoulds and shouldn'ts about this new situation. It's
It's
as simple as that. We can actually
it's a
look at the
clump of
situation
cells.
objectively and tell people you should do this and you shouldn't do that. And the should is so great and the shouldn't is so bad that we could put it into law. And
Okay,
that's
all
how
right.
this works. We'll talk to you undefined. Hear what they have to say.
Just because some women don't suffer mental health issues after having traumatic experiences and getting pregnant as a result of SA, that doesn't mean it applies to everyone.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
I don't think that
so
was the statement she made, but
Okay, so I'm curious to see what your standpoint is on. So say someone has been essayed, a woman's been essayed, and
terrible thing.
she's now fallen pregnant. Would you prefer that? And her mental health is a complete mess. Would you prefer that she carries the child to term and potentially then neglects the child and her mental health takes the better of her, and then she goes on to abuse the child later on, because looking at the child in the face will then cause her to remember her traumatic experience? Or would you prefer that she aborts an embryo or a fetus before it comes to the stage of actually becoming a human being?
It's amazing how you charged up that first option, but you forgot to add some essential details about the second option. If I may add to the second option without changing changing what you've put forth too much.
Go ahead.
We're talking about a human being here. We're talking about a human being in the womb, a human being that has a whole future life ahead of it, a human being that will develop and become like you and I, and the woman's actually choosing to deprive that being of their future life.
So sorry, I understand.
To answer your question, between these kind of crazy options, right? Either we off a kid or we allow the kid to be abused and neglected. I still would choose the latter, because it's really bad to purposefully take away somebody's life that has done nothing wrong.
Okay, but in so many cases, we're seeing children be unalived on a daily basis from abuse and neglect. My point, it stemmed from, obviously, the situation at hand is there are kids that are being seriously abused and neglected to the point that they do get unalived on a daily basis. So would you prefer, what you're sitting here saying is you would prefer...
What I am saying is that in principle, it is wrong to off kids. So if you believe that you ought to off the children that are going to suffer and be abused, then why don't we off them outside the womb? Why don't we go around, find a way to off them that will be no pain to them, and just deprive them of their lives now? Because it's so terrible.
What you're saying, though, is you would prefer someone with severe mental health issues to go on and unalive a child when they've actually come out of the womb and they're alive.
That's not what I said. I never made that statement. Let me push this back on you. If you are so worried about these children, would you support euthanizing them? Would you support euthanizing them outside of the womb, taking away their lives, depriving them of everything that they have, their whole existence?
Right. The word euthanasia actually means support to die. And support to die is only when there's a severe illness and they're already knocking on death's door.
Right. So in your worldview, I think it's actually quite appropriate to use that word, because you view the human experience, even the most brutal human experiences that people go through, as illness. Would you support infanticide? Would you support taking away the lives of these infants or any of these people that are suffering because their lives are so brutal? Would you give them that option?
It depends on what the definition that what blanket.
I think I'm using language that's quite clear.
No, but
right? You're saying that because these children are going to suffer, that they're going to have very difficult lives, that we should deprive them of their life from the point they're in the womb. Okay, well, there are in the world today, there are currently kids who are being beaten. There are currently kids that are suffering. There are currently kids who are mistreated by their parents. Would you support a policy where we go around and we put these kids out of their misery, which to you would be to take away their life?
No, I would prefer that they're put out of their misery before they come into the world.
No, that's not what I asked you. I didn't ask you to choose between two things. I asked you specifically, would you support this policy, yes or no?
Of course not.
Of course not. Why? Why? They're suffering, and that's what you care about. You said that the children are going to suffer. It's going to be brutal, James. We got to deprive them of their life in the womb. Okay, well, same children or same type or situations are seen today outside the womb. So let's fix the problem whole. Let's go around and take out these kids.
Yes,
why don't we do that?
If abortion was more accessible, okay, and it was provided as an option for people, so if they didn't feel like they were mentally ready or mentally prepared to have the child and didn't think that they'd be able to mentally cope with it, they would have aborted the child before it became a child, when it was a fetus or an embryo in the womb.
Okay, but in both cases, you're still depriving them of their life and their future life.
So
why is it okay to do it inside the womb, but it's not okay to do it outside?
Let me ask you this.
Connect that bridge to me.
At what point do you think an embryo or a fetus actually becomes a baby.
From the point it's conceived. I mean, that's the only way I can understand it as a baby.
So
that is true.
You think that a fertilized egg before it develops a heartbeat, before it develops any cognitive function, is life?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. What are you before you're a baby?
You're an egg.
You're an egg? You're just an egg? That's not true.
You're an egg.
No, you're not. You're not just an egg.
You are,
You're a zygote. You're a fertilized egg.
You're a zygote.
You're not just an egg alone. That would be half of the genetic code necessary to make a unique individual human organism.
Actually, you're an egg before anything else. But continue, because a woman a female is actually born with all of the eggs that she'll ever have in her lifetime. So you're an egg before anything else. But continue.
When in your worldview, when do you become a baby?
Once there's a heartbeat developed.
So what are you the day before the heartbeat develops? What are you?
At that point, you're not alive. You're not alive. You're not alive.
You're not alive? Are you growing?
No, there is no life there.
Are you growing?
There is no life there.
There's no life there. Are you growing before that point?
You will be. Well, in some instances.
How are you growing if you're not alive?
In some because you're sucking the life out of the person who's carrying.
You're sucking the life out of the person? What does that even mean? So before the heartbeat, you're sucking the life out of the person, so you're not alive. But after the heartbeat, you're not sucking the life out of the person, and at which point you've developed a heartbeat and legally you're defined as alive. I'm sorry. I'm from the UK. It's not about legally. I don't really care about any sort of legal infrastructure or human law on this matter. I'm specifically asking you for what is true about the matter.
I've got a question for you. What makes you think you've got the right to comment on what a female chooses to do with her body, since you don't have a womb or can produce children?
Because that female wants to actually offer kids, and I don't think she should do that. So I'm gonna
Why do you think you have a say in that?
Because if you off other people in our political community, anybody can have a say in a representative democracy. That's how this works.
Except that's not correct, but continue.
Except that is correct. That's how it works in the United States. I don't know what country you're from, but here we vote for our representation, and I get to have political speech, and I'm exercising that by telling women to stop slaughtering their kids.
They're not slaughtering their kids, though.
They are, yeah. They're depriving all of their children of their future lives. It's a very terrible thing to do.
They're not, though. It's before the child becomes before the.
Yeah, so I think that you don't realize how foolish you sound. Because you're saying things that are just inaccurate. It is a life before the heartbeat. We all know this. The thing's developing. It's a human being that's alive. The human being? It doesn't start off dead. It starts off alive, and it continues to develop.
So when does a zygote develop cognitive function?
I don't know exactly. I don't even know what you mean by that. But none of that matters because it's still a human being and it still has its whole future ahead of it. So you're still depriving that being of their life and their future life.
You don't even have your facts in check. You don't have
the beginnings of the brain start within the first 2 months. I mean, things start to pop up pretty early. 28 days, you have the heartbeat. Within 3 months, you have fingers, toes. Your limbs are all there. I have pictures here if you'd like to see, if you've never seen the baby in the womb. When it comes down to cognitive functions, I mean, that's a difficult conversation in itself. But none of that really matters to me because I believe in protecting human life, and I believe in protecting the futures of those children.
I'm sorry. The last point I'm going to make is until you develop a womb and develop the ability to carry a child and know what it's like to carry a child and know the struggles that women have to go through on a day-to-day basis, you cannot make a comment. Like, you can't comment on the struggles a female has to go through to be able to carry a child to full term and bring them to life. I know more about what it's like being a female and carrying a child than you do, considering I am a female and I do have a female body and I do have a womb. So until you, like I said, until you have the ability to grow a womb and carry a child yourself and go through the struggles, we'll then see. Like, I would have loved to have you develop a womb and then see the struggles that you'd go through, and then we'll see what choices.
Yeah,
you make.
I don't doubt that you'll struggle. Carrying a child, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't protect the child's life, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't sustain that child's life. Those are things that you have to prove if you disagree with. That's up to you to prove, right? You're making kind of the radical choice here, which is that, forget this whole idea of all humans having the right to life. Forget protecting innocent life. Forget that mattering. Let's just deprive them of their life. Well, why? Can you substantiate without some BS talking point.
Okay. Okay, completely different scenario. So a pregnant woman goes into the clinic. Here's the child growing inside of her is going to grow and develop to become severely disabled, blind, deaf, and unable to walk or whatever. Do you then think it is sensible for her to unalive that child?
No.
Considering the quality of life
No.
that child is going to have is very, very limited.
Can we off that child when it's a day old? Can we off that child when it's a day old?
Considering that their quality of life is going to be very, very limited, you answered the question with a question.
I said no.
You answered the question.
I will share it with you. I said no, and then I asked you a question. You didn't listen to what I said. No, you cannot off your kid just because they're going to be deaf, blind, and they can't walk. Would you support offing the kid when they're a day old?
At which point the kid probably will die at some point. If you were told that your kid was only going to live for 6 months,
would you support offing if the doctors predicted that the kid is going to live for 6 months? Would you predict measures to off the kid when they're a day old?
The doctors may then suggest offing the kid. What would you suggest that's done then? So if a doctor then says
I'm asking you a question about a hypothetical situation that you began to contrive.
Yeah,
if the kid's going to survive, according to the doctors, they make a prediction that they're going to survive for 6 months. Do you think that it's justified to off the kid at a day old?
Yes.
Wow. So you support infanticide? That's crazy. That is crazy. You know what's insane about that is that it's not only just so morally wrong that you think that we should give an option to commit infanticide just because some person in a lab coat predicts a child will live for 6 months, but it's so incredibly selfish. Like you're looking at your kid and you're saying, "Oh, I'm only going to have you for 6 months. Might as well get rid of you now."
Okay, so here's a question for you then. Here's a question for you then. So people that are on life support and the family is then told, okay, we need to turn off the machines. Would you turn off the machines, or would you let them be on life support for God knows how many years?
Do they have a future life? Is there anything that we can do to save their life?
Bearing in mind they're on life support, so potentially.
We do everything we can to save their life. If we're at a point where we can no longer save their life, then they're not here. They are gone. For the model, I would look at that is that they are dead, and we're just playing around with machinery, and we can't really fix anything. But you treat humans with great respect, and you try to do everything you can to save their lives. Going
back to the previous point about the child that has 6 months, and they know that they can't do anything after that to save their life. Yeah, we're talking about a maximum of 6 months. There have been cases where a child's died prior to that. Yeah, would you then support the possibility of getting an abortion and stopping that child from going through grueling months of suffering?
No, because we shouldn't be playing God. We shouldn't make a prediction and then say, okay, well, I've somehow predicted that you're only going to live for 8 months and you're going to suffer the entire way. And somehow I know how your life experience is going to be. Therefore, I'm going to make the decision that you're not worthy to live. No, that's not how this works. We shouldn't do that. Let me ask you a question. If you and now let's deal in the cases of most abortions, because this whole conversation, and I've allowed it to happen. I guess shame on me. But we've just been talking about the most difficult situations that make up less than a full percentage point. In the case where we have a fully healthy baby and there's nothing wrong with the child according to the doctors, but the mother believes in her heart that the child is going to suffer, do you think that it's the mother's prerogative to take away the child's life in the womb?
Absolutely not. There are other options. There's putting it up for adoption, and also
you're pro-life to some extent. You would ban abortions in some cases.
In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. In cases where there's like a medical detriment to either the mother or the child, then yes. In other cases where obviously you've just become pregnant because you've not been responsible or whatever, no.
Okay. And so when would you ban abortions? What would be your principles?
In which cases I would ban abortion?
Yes.
Was that your question? So if the mother's had a one-night stand or used protection and the condom broke, or the pill didn't work or whatever, the the accidental the accidental pregnancies, or the then deciding you didn't want to be pregnant anymore, or the I'm going to split up with my partner and I don't want to be a single mother anymore, or anything that doesn't involve a medical standpoint or a medical sort of issue with that is going to impact the mother or the child later on in life, then yes, I would 100% support being pro-life.
Okay, so you would be, as long as it's not going to affect the mother's life, as long as she's not going to lose her life, you're pro-life?
It's not just the mother's life, but the child's life too, yes.
Okay, so you realize that that's like 99% of cases now. That's the vast, vast majority of cases where the child doesn't have any like very, very serious ailments, and the mother, the mother is fine.
Bearing in mind, from a religious standpoint, I am pro-life, but I do respect that there are certain cases where situations demand abortion happening.
Yeah,
so,
you just believe that certain situations, the human in the womb doesn't have as much protection as, or shouldn't be given as much protection as other humans.
So let me, not necessarily.
That's the principle of the argument, and I just disagree with that at face value.
But if the mother is being, let's say the mother is in an abusive relationship, and being beaten up on a daily basis, taken whacks to the stomach on a daily basis, and the child has now sustained sustainable brain injury or whatever, and it's been said by the doctors that they're probably going to end up being born a vegetable. At which point, yes, I would support abortion, because it's no quality of life for a child, and I don't believe that they should.
Do you believe that people who become vegetables, that they have no quality of life?
They don't.
Do you believe we should just off them?
They don't have any quality of life.
Do you believe that we should just off them? Would it be right to just off them?
People that are vegetables are offed on a daily basis.
Do you?
A vegetable.
Can you just answer the question? Do you believe that we should just off them?
Yes, the definition of a human vegetable.
So we should just off individuals that are considered vegetables.
Yes.
Okay, what about somebody who can't move their limbs? They can only move their head. Should we off them?
No.
They're on a big machine.
No.
No. So you would specifically just off people that are what?
That are severely going to have their life impacted by the lack of cognitive function. So absolutely no cognitive function, and being on life support, because there's no life there at that point. Being brain dead actually makes you you're considered dead at that point. But the definition of dead is the lack of brain activity. At that point, or if the child is going to come out with severe issues, health impacts that are going to cause it to suffer early on in life, and potentially cause it to lose its life in the first few days, or the first few weeks, or the first few months, then yes. But other than that, nothing else, really.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming up. Thank you for the conversation. That was very confusing. I don't know how she was pro-life. She came in very ready to debate the fringe cases, and that's usually what pro-choicers do, because they don't have good arguments, so they try to tug at emotions. And then she ended up being pro-life. But I had a feeling that she wasn't really publicly pro-life, but she's privately pro-life. But that's silly. We could have got down to that, but I'm a bit tired, so we'll talk about that some other time. And if you've ever been in the streams, for the 57 people who are still here, I've talked about it a million times as to why that's just a really silly position to hold. Okay, so that'll be it for me tonight, guys.